You are listening to the Wannabe Collective, your new variety podcast featuring every fandom that you could possibly think of. On the Wannabe Collective, all wannabes are welcome. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to Keeping It Real from Wannabe Critic Productions. Of course, this is the Wannabe Collective podcast feed. Here you'll find a plethora of things, all things, nerd, I would say. Today we're talking about Star Wars, and of course, Keeping It Real is our movie review show. We want to thank you so much for being here, and like I said, we're continuing our Star Wars journey through, talking about the sequels and kind of diving into those, and it's gonna be a good show. I'm super excited for it. I just watched the movie today, and yeah, I'm pumped to talk about it. So tonight I have joining with me though, I have one Caleb Henley and one Rex Tucker. Gentlemen, how are we feeling tonight?
Feeling good.
Feeling good.
Yeah, it's been a while since we podcasted together. It's been a good while, actually. It feels Rex was making a joke. He was just like, "Yeah, I forgot how to podcast." I just forgot how to podcast with you guys. We haven't done it in weeks. So actually, me and Caleb, we just recorded one last week, right, with Guy, right?
Yeah, was that just last year? Week? Wow.
Yeah. I guess that was last week.
Time flies, man.
Yeah, I have gray hairs. Is all I'm trying to say. No, but I'm super excited to have you guys back. It's good to hear you've been doing good, and I thought we would start the show tonight by kind of talking about what we've been up to, like that's Star Wars related. We were kind of talking like off mic, and we can kind of do a little bit of catching up and whatnot. But Caleb, I wanted to throw it to you. What's been new in your Star Wars world?
In my Star Wars world, not much. I mean, I've been wow, I can't talk today. This is gonna be a fun one. I've been going through and replaying Jedi Fallen Order for that project that we're doing, and then watching these movies. Oh, I'm still reading the original Thrawn trilogy. I'm in Dark Force Rising. I'm about halfway through that book right now, so reading through that, really enjoying that, and I feel like that's kind of appropriate since we're starting the sequel trilogy. I'm reading through those. Yeah, good compare and contrast. But that's basically it in my Star Wars world. Oh, yeah, and then I just told you guys off mic, but in February, me and my wife are going to be going down to Disney in Orlando, and I'm going to get to go to Galaxy's Edge, which will be really cool, going with a couple of friends of ours. So really excited about that. I haven't gotten to experience that, so should be fun. Be able to make my own lightsaber and stuff.
Yeah, I'm super curious. I know some people, like, they go, and obviously, like, that's so popular there. Like, you might have a certain color that you really, really want, but they may not have it. So you better choose wisely, Caleb, is all I'm trying to say. Yeah.
I'll probably end up with, like, purple or pink or something.
You'll be like Samuel L., if you get the purple one.
I guess purple's not the worst thing in the world.
That's what I would pick. I mean, purple's my favorite color, so, it'd be pretty easy for me to pick that one. It's funny you mentioned Jedi Fallen Order. I'm trying to finish up a couple of games right now for Game Club. Of course, we have, you may not know about it. I say, of course, you may not know about it yet, but over with the Bush League guys, we're doing, I'm doing with the Supergiant Games series. We're reviewing each one of those, and those are going to start rolling out pretty soon. The day I get my special edition vinyl, Songs of Supergiant vinyl, is when Bastion will, the Bastion review will come out, and we'll kind of start rolling that out. And that'll be a fun episode too, because there's a pretty personal story about why I love Supergiant Games so much. So I'm looking forward to that rolling out. But I'm also looking forward to finishing those other Game Club games so I can finally beat Jedi Fallen Order, because I've not beaten it yet. I've had it for so long and I still haven't beaten it. So that'll be exciting. Rex, what's been new in your world / Star Wars world?
Man, not too much. I feel like it's been quiet in the Star Wars universe. I don't know, for me. But I did get the volume 1 of the High Republic comic book series, where it's like all bound in one.
Very nice.
I got that. I read a little bit of that. What else? I watched the first couple episodes of Visions. I know I'm like way behind. But
I haven't watched any of it yet. So
okay, I think you need to watch the first episode at least, because it was really good. and they're all different stories. So, you know, each one is going to be, you know, some are good, some aren't. But I watched like 2 or 3 episodes, and the first one definitely was my favorite, and because it was like samurai style anime, and in a Star Wars world, you know, and
Yeah.
they did it really well, and it was just really, really good. And I would say everyone definitely watch that one.
Yeah, that's what I've heard everyone say, like the same thing. Like the first episode is just like Kurosawa-esque, you know, like just like incredible. So go ahead, Caleb. I think I cut you off.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that first one's really good. There's some really good ones in there. I think I still have one to watch. I haven't completely finished it yet. What's cool about those two, though, is they're all pretty short. They're only like, you know, somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes. So you can go through them pretty quickly. And yeah, I think they're really good. And I'm not an anime guy at all. Like, I don't know anything about it and have never really watched anime, but I really liked all of those. They're pretty cool.
Yeah, nice. I'm looking forward to getting through that for sure and watching it. I feel like here's the thing, okay? I feel like all this Star Wars news just kind of like passes us by nowadays, and it just kind of feels like commonplace. Whereas before, we've talked about this like a million times. Like, there's so much Star Wars content out there, and that's so good. But at the same time, there's so much happening all at once, and I can't keep up with it all. Like, it's hard for me to like consume all of it in a timely manner that's topical. And you know, it's just weird to be living in a time like that now, where that's never happened before.
And I feel like we're waiting too, like, for stuff to come out. Like, we've seen a million trailers, and we know everything that's coming, so we're kind of like waiting a lot. And like, you know, Visions was just a small little project.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it feels.
Yeah, of course we did get news that Andor, right? Is that the name of the series?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's going to be coming out Q4 in 2022, which is interesting. That's kind of interesting to talk about. Like, does that mean that there's no Mando next year? Or, you know, because that would kind of be around this time period. It'd be I don't know. It would seem strange to launch both of those shows like right next to each other. I mean, don't you think? Or does it make sense to launch Mandalorian and a supplemental type of show like Andor at the same time? What do you guys think?
I don't think they'll release them at the same time. That would seems like they would kind of drown themselves out. But I could see them releasing them a few months apart from each other. I mean, I definitely think that there's enough space for that.
Like, have Mando come out like in October, and then like Andor come out like in like December or something. January.
Yeah, I guess if it's 2022. Yeah, probably December. But yeah, I could definitely see something like that working. I can't wait for the Obi-Wan series and the Ahsoka series too. Which hopefully it'll be coming out.
I think everyone's just
soon.
like so focused on those, and like we're all waiting for them.
Well,
and
I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Do we know when Mando is coming out this year?
There's nothing. No, it's not coming out this year. Book of Boba Fett's coming out this year. So
that's
I mean, we're
kind of
not
disappointing.
I know. I mean, like, we were talking about it. It was so funny. We were talking about it on Punch Counter Punch, another show. Obviously, if you, ladies and gentlemen, don't realize, over on the Wannabe Critic podcast, my main podcast feed, we were kind of talking about that. And it was funny. Mikey was like, "Yeah, man, they don't have very many shots. Like, it's not, you know, they're not done yet with the show or something." And then Ethan was just like, "It's coming out in December. It has to be done." You know, it's just. Go ahead.
I will say, like, I listened to your guys' conversation about that, and I think that they specifically chose to only show so much.
Yeah.
In that ad for Book of Boba Fett.
They had to.
Because it does seem really limited. Like, what they showed was maybe like only from like the first 2 episodes. Because it just seemed really limited. But I think that's intentional. And I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be really cool. I'd be really disappointed if it wasn't. But yeah, I think it's going to be awesome. I think that they just chose to be kind of stingy with what they put out there for us.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be one of those things. It's like, you obviously don't want to give away all your, you know, whatever. I don't know what the thing is. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And I think looking back at the trailer, it does seem similar to a Mando trailer in that, you know, there isn't a lot really happening in those trailers either. If I recall, it was just like, yeah, it looks cool, you know, nothing that just blows my socks off. Yet whenever it comes out, we're like, oh my god, this is awesome, you know. And it is always fun to just kind of ruffle Ethan's feathers and get him mad about stuff, you know. Like, we're obviously gonna watch it. We'll probably do like a week to week podcast on it, you know, and like talk about it and make content around it and all that other stuff. It's just, you know, we love. I love arguing with Ethan. It's like it's one of my favorite things to do. It is kind of interesting to think about like the Andor series though too, because it reminds me of whenever Marvel Comics started releasing new stories around you know, characters that we know, like Poe and like Kylo Ren kind of got his like origin story and stuff like that. So it kind of seems like an extension of that a little bit. So, you know, I'm excited to see what they do for a character that I don't really care that much about, you know, and see how it fits into the Star Wars universe. So anyways, is there anything else that you guys want to mention before we move on with our review of The Force Awakens?
Oh, I got a cool poster from Mondo. Let me show you it real quick.
Oh, yeah, that's dope. I love Mondo, dude. Like,
I can't hear you guys because my earphones are off, but...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, observe the art, ladies and gentlemen. For audio listeners.
From Mondo, and...
Yeah, audio listeners get wrecked.
I'm really loving their posters.
Yeah, dude, I love like the custom art that Mondo puts out, and it's kind of cool. It's like the same art that you can find within the Alamo Drafthouse theaters, the same style of art, because obviously Mondo and Alamo, they're like partnered. So I love that partnership. I hope it never dies. Like, that's why we exclusively go see movies at Alamo, because it's just the best place to go see movies. So anyways, very cool, man. I'm jealous. I'm also consumed with jealous rage for that poster, you know. So, anyways, well, ladies and gentlemen, it's come to that point in the show where we're gonna start our review process. If you haven't seen Star Wars: The Force Awakens, where you at? I mean, why haven't you seen it? We're going to be full-on spoilers with this movie. The time has come. So, The Force Awakens, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, released in 2015. It's rated PG-13 with a runtime of 2 hours and 18 minutes. As a new threat to the galaxy rises, Rey, a desert scavenger, and Finn, an ex-stormtrooper, must join Han Solo and Chewbacca to search for the one hope of restoring peace, which is, I mean, this entire movie is based on the fact that Luke Skywalker is missing, right? And that's kind of that's what the plot revolves around and kind of hangs on, is finding Luke Skywalker. So, rather than going through, you know, the traditional review process, I wanted to just kind of take a minute to talk about some of the things that we appreciate about this movie, as well as some of the popular criticisms, and give our takes on those, and then kind of talk about how this fits as a whole into these, you know, these next three movies, or, you know, the sequel trilogy as we've come to know it. So who wants to go first? Caleb, you got anything you want to start with? Positives?
Positives. Yeah, I do enjoy this movie. I remember when I first saw this movie, I loved it. I thought it was awesome. Super high production quality. I like, you know, just about all the new characters that are introduced in this. And I love, I mean, you see Han, Leia, and Luke all in this movie. I mean, I know Luke's right at the end, but, and yeah, I mean, at the time when I saw this movie, I didn't have any complaints with it at all. I think a lot of the criticism that I think gets put onto this movie now, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it, is due to the next two movies and just kind of the way that the whole, you know, trilogy kind of went with it. But this movie, as it kind of stands alone and looking at it through the lens of like it by itself before the other two movies came out, I don't really have too much of a problem with this movie. There's little things and details and things where it could have been improved, but for the most part, I like this movie.
Well said. Rex, anything you want to add to that?
I'm pretty much... I feel exactly as Caleb does. Like, this movie by itself is really good, and there's like little cheesy things in it, and stuff you just like wish kind of wasn't in a Star Wars movie. But other than that, It does really good, and I think it holds up with kind of what we were expecting or what we wanted. The thing is I think down the line people might be a little confused about this movie because um, it's really about when this movie came out and how much Star Wars hype there was around this. And we hadn't had any Star Wars content in a long time. Much, I think, probably very similar to when Episode 1 came out, you know? And we didn't have, we just wanted more Star Wars stuff. And we got this movie that was kind of ultra nostalgic. And it was like kind of perfect for when it came out. And like, the only thing that I would say is not so perfect about it is like the plot is really similar to some other, you know, Star Wars movies. And that was probably the only thing that I was kind of like, this is weird. Like, why did they just do this again? And there's a few things in the movie that don't connect, but then there's other things in this movie that are really, really good and just done so well. And I'm sure we'll get into those.
Yeah, I really like the way you said that. I'm just gonna tell you guys right now, I still like this movie. This is my least favorite time though that I viewed it, I think. And it's not so much the movie's fault. I think the movie, whenever you look at it like objectively, like it's good. Like it's beautiful. There's good action. I think the performances are pretty good, aside from that cringy moment whenever Finn yells Rey as she's flying away, and it's just so bad. Like I've always thought that part, Rey! Like he sounds like Bobby Boucher from The Waterboy, you know. Just kind of a cringe, you know. And there is a couple little moments, you know, like for instance, whenever she tells Han Solo what she did, she's like, I bypassed the whatever, you know, and just kind of showing off her prowess as a pilot and all this other stuff. And like, you hit it on the head. You both did. Whenever this movie came out, this was like hype, like hot, new hotness. Like I loved it. I loved this movie. I loved going to the theater to see this movie. And it's just frustrating that it just has no connection to the second movie in the series or the third movie at all. Like, it's pretty evident that after this movie came out, the suits freaked because of the polarizing response. And instead of
no.
What? Go ahead.
No. The polarizing response didn't come until The Last Jedi. The suits didn't freak out after this movie, I don't think. Because the plan all along...
I'm trying to remember.
The plan all along was that they were going to do these movies, and they wanted to have 3 different directors with 3 different visions for each one, because somebody thought that that was a good idea. And they went with that. They had J.J. Abrams do this first one, and they had Rian Johnson do the next one. But Rian Johnson took it in such a different direction than J.J. Abrams, and then that led to so many polarizing views, and it makes it feel like they're like in 2 separate universes just because they have like 2 different tones and 2 different styles and 2 different whatever. And that's when things really freaked out. And then it's after the fact and after watching The Last Jedi that you come back to this movie and it's just like, what in the world is going on? And that's kind of the thing. I don't think it was after this movie that everyone freaked. I think that this movie had all of the success, and I don't remember hearing much of anything bad about this movie until after The Last Jedi came out. And then The Last Jedi was so polarizing that not only were people split on that movie, but then people went back to this movie and started to re-criticize it with a new eye of now they're looking at it through a different lens because things had changed so much. If that makes any sense. I don't think it had anything to do with this movie singularly by itself, but then it's because of going back and looking at it through the lens of watching The Last Jedi and then looking at it through the lens of watching it through The Rise of Skywalker, and then it gets this whole other critical tone that it doesn't necessarily deserve when it came out by itself, if that makes any sense.
Well, and this is news to me too, that the plan all along was to have 3 different directors. I thought that the shift was after this movie came out, because you must be remembering like for me it was a completely different experience. Like there were many people in my area, that hated this movie. Like I was kind of like alone for a while, like in liking it, and then that could be way off. It could be from that was a very fuzzy time period for me too. But I can remember, like defending this movie to people, outside of just like obviously like we talk about. Me and Ethan will go round and round about Star Wars for a long time, and we did there, and but it wasn't just him. It was like everyone I knew didn't like this movie. So
really,
yeah, it was.
That's really surprising. I remember. Sorry, go ahead, Rex.
I just want to say that I can remember that one thing I really disliked was the similar plot to the first trilogy. And with having a Death Star-like thing that's now a planet, and it's like, okay, this was really dumb, and I hated that they just redid it. And, like, I did hate that part, but I also felt like, okay, so much time has passed. We needed some nostalgia to kind of, like, pull us back in. And they did a lot of things well with that, bringing back, Han Solo and, like, they said all the sayings that you want to hear in the Star Wars movie, and like that triggered your nostalgic feels, I guess. And I was kind of thinking like, okay, this is the setup movie. Like they didn't know what to do, or they just wanted to draw people back to how they felt with the original trilogy, because they know how dear people like hold that trilogy to their hearts. And that was my opinion. Now, I did hate the plot, and I was probably one of those people that like, yeah, it was good. Like, it was good. Like, I wish they did this different or whatever. Like, I didn't really care. Like, do something new, And I was like, oh, the next two movies will bring that. So that was my opinion, and I thought that's what most people felt, was like, okay, like, where are they going to go with this? Not necessarily like, oh, this is terrible.
Right, but yeah, no, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think the point I'm trying to get at is saying that there wasn't backlash. I don't think is like, I do think it. I don't know if it was split down the middle, but I know that there was a very vocal part of the fan base that was not having it, And I do have something to say here on. I pulled up a thing from Wikipedia. Go ahead, Caleb. I'll want to make sure I have this. Go for it.
No, I was just going to say that's really surprising to me. I agree with Rex. The biggest criticism I ever remember about this movie at the time, before the next two came out, was the plot, and that it was extremely reminiscent of A New Hope. And I know that around the same time, and maybe this is tempering with maybe some of the opinions you heard, it was those Aftermath books came out around the same time as this movie, or maybe right after. And I know those were very poorly received by a very strong majority of the Star Wars community, especially the Star Wars community that's maybe a little bit of less mainstream and maybe a little bit more involved into it, where they're actually reading the books. And I think maybe that started to kind of, I don't know, affect how people viewed this movie, is because you get a taste of those Aftermath books, and then it's like, well, it starts to kind of make everything taste worse. But yeah, I don't remember like any of like my friends all loved it. I don't remember anything other than other than what Rex said. I don't remember hearing any criticism.
It might have just been like your friends, or like, everyone has different experiences with how their friends perceived it. Like I had friends that didn't care for it that much as well, but for the most part, everyone seemed okay with it.
Yeah, I just remember coming out of the theater. There was like 7 of us, and we were all like so hyped. And then by the end of it, like I feel like I was kind of like, me and one other person were kind of like the only ones enjoying it. Find ourselves enjoying it. I remember being super bummed, and I remember being like thinking to myself like, this is gonna be bad. And I just remember like reading on Twitter and like stuff like that, just like a lot of different stuff. And I mean, of course, it's been years ago at this point, but I wanted to read an excerpt from Wikipedia, where it says, after J.J. Abrams joined the group in January 2013, they began meeting at his Bad Robot office and also at Kennedy's nearby office. Abrams was then announced as director, and he and Kasdan, also another director, were largely given creative control, after which they heavily modified much of Arndt's script. So there had been a bit of a process, trying to get this thing made. Kasdan later recounted the situation to the New York Times, saying they were getting close to when they were supposed to start production, and we had nothing, so they came to me and said, will you do this with JJ? We told Michael, and he's good with it. I said, all right, it was just us. They got rid of everybody. Kennedy offered Abrams the opportunity to direct all 3 films, but he declined, feeling overwhelmed. She thus decided to replicate how the original trilogy was produced, in that each film would have a different director who could apply their personal vision. So, that, straight out of the horse's mouth, Caleb had it right. That was the kind of their initial thing, which I had never realized that. But yeah, how can you expect it to be concise after that point? And directing is largely different than writing. So George Lucas wrote all 3 films. That's the difference. So, I think it would have been less a big of a deal. And it even goes on later on this article to say that they wanted to leave things open-ended. Like they didn't have a plan. Of course, we realized last year, they admit they didn't have a roadmap. And at the time, I remember reading that and being like, big deal. I still love these movies, until it's time to go back and watch them. And you realize how much this movie does not match the rest of the trilogy, and I still really like this movie in that because I liked the fact that it was kind of mirroring the original trilogy. I think that's kind of what I wanted, was that sense of familiarity a little bit. But yeah, it's just kind of an interesting perspective to look at as these movies are still coming out. And I find myself, I think, and obviously I have to rewatch them, but I think if I had to pick one or the other, I think I like The Rise of Skywalker more than I like this movie. And yeah, I don't know. I think so. We'll see whenever we get to it. But anyways,
yeah, I'm not sure. Rise of Skywalker, I guess we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
There's too much to say there.
Yeah, but no, good on you, Caleb, for bringing that up, because I never knew that was always the intended plan, But still, either way, it is interesting to see.
Basically, they didn't have a story, and they're just like, let's just go. Basically. And let's just make this, and this is what we get, 3 totally different movies.
It is wild to me that was allowed to happen, and just based on that's how they did it back with the original trilogy. And it's just yeah, but Lucas had his hands on all of that, and that's why those movies flow together. It's because that was his baby, it was his child, and he was there for every single little part of it. And I'm sure he had a little bit of input here, but yeah, just handing it to 3 different guys and going through all these different rewrites. And we'll get into some of the stuff with the next 2 movies, but it's insane. I can't imagine not sitting down and just having an end goal, and not they didn't have an end. They just wanted to leave it open-ended. It boggles my mind that they did that. It's just crazy.
Even the actors have said they didn't know what was going on or who was going to be what, or Daisy's I didn't know whose child I was going to be. It's
yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. Well, and even in this movie, now, I never gave it a second thought initially, her piloting skills and stuff like that. Obviously, she's super in tune with the Force, and, I'm fine with all that. That's not the issue. I think it's just the issue of it was implied that she was going to be a Skywalker, in that moment. Because, we know that the Skywalkers are really good pilots. I don't recall Palpatine ever flying anything ever. You know what I mean? So it was just kind of that was one thing I was noticing is wow. I could give it to her. It would stand to reason that she might have some experience piloting things and be super duper in tune with the Force, because that was the same thing with Anakin. But then again, it's
everything in this movie,
it's just kind of muddled, go for it.
Sorry. Everything in this movie that she does, I'm pretty much fine with. It makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually going to be something I wanted to talk about, was I think, we talk about Ray being good at everything, and that's a very common thing that comes up with these movies and the problem people have. I think it kind of works in this movie because I think they're trying to basically be like, well, she was a scavenger for all of these years. She knows her way around all of this different Imperial and probably also Rebel equipment that's left over from the Battle of Jakku, and they even kind of hint to that. I never picked up on it when they're infiltrating Starkiller Base with Han and Chewie, and she pulls a part out, and it like opens a bunch of doors. Well, it's mimicking an exact shot from earlier that she pulled the exact same part out of a Star Destroyer in on Jakku, like from way earlier in the movie when it's like, I think they're trying to kind of be like, well, she is skilled, she does have some knowledge, and she's also attuned. So I don't have a problem too much with any of the stuff that she does in this movie specifically, if that makes any sense, I guess.
Yeah. But when you watch the other movies, then you're like, okay, now I have a problem with her flying.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a strange experience for me, rewatching these movies and thinking to myself, like, man, why don't I like this as much this time, And I think it's literally just because of the fact that the end point, there's no inkling, of connection at all, other than it's Rey. So it does take away from me enjoying this particular movie. Let's pivot a little bit. My favorite part of this movie is Kylo Ren. I think they set him up to be like a really, really cool bad guy in this movie, and just kind of showed that like immature rage, like, and he's no slouch. Like, he knows how to use the Force. He did something we've never seen before, stopped a laser bolt right as it's coming to him. So they established within the first 5 minutes of the movie that he's evidently has a very strong connection to the Force, which I thought was really cool. And his character is multifaceted. So like whenever the guy tells me, he's like, hey, we weren't able to find the droid, he just starts like going ham on the computer. I remember like I laughed out loud today. I remember like everyone laughing in the theater and thinking like, is this guy for real? And I don't know, like I really like Kylo Ren in this movie. Like, I think he fits. He's a nice tone setter. Like he sets the tone pretty well. And I think it's a good metaphor for just kind of where the First Order is at in general. Like not really very organized. Like just dangerous enough to, you kind of have to like pay attention to them, but still it's just kind of like whatever. Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, I have an interesting take on Kylo Ren. I like him a lot too. I love Adam Driver as an actor. He's great.
Good soup.
He's he's awesome. But it's interesting. He is brutal in this movie.
Yeah,
like just brutal. And I was trying to compare it a little bit to Darth Vader in New Hope, and he's definitely, I think Kylo in this movie is way more brutal than Vader is in New Hope, because our first time meeting Kylo Ren, he stabs that old dude and then has the stormtroopers kill an entire village. The worst thing, really, that we see Vader do is choking out a rebel officer on, the Tantive 4 or whatever. But it's not nearly as brutal. And then, Kylo kills Han Solo, like kills his own father. And, Vader doesn't do anything that brutal. Like, his entire time, he shoots a few X-Wing. Well, yeah, episode 3, but but like in episode 4 specifically. In episode 4 specifically, which this movie is very much kind of modeled after. Yeah, episode 3 is its own can of worms. But no, and Vader doesn't do anything that brutal when we're introduced to Vader. It's like, yeah, he's this big, ominous bad guy, but it's Grand Moff Tarkin that's ordering for Alderaan to get destroyed, and they're part of it's like a war. It's like this interaction between the Resistance and the New Order isn't even necessarily a full-blown war yet when we are first introduced to Kylo. But Kylo's just doing all of these terrible, terrible things, and it's really interesting as we'll see his story progress through these movies, just how much of a turn he's able to make, because he just seems so terribly evil throughout this entire movie.
Yeah, he's my favorite thing about this entire trilogy, I think. They just do a really good, like his character arc is pretty good, honestly. Like it's, I think, objectively good. Throughout these 3 movies, and obviously we'll get into it more, but yeah, no, that is a good point though. Like, yeah, I mean, he's just doesn't care. He's like, yeah, that sounds fun. Yeah, kill them all. You know what I mean? Go for it. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rex.
I feel the same way about as Caleb, like, and you. I think he's the best thing to come out of this series, pretty much. And the thing is you get so much backstory and like character development with his character, and there's like so much to it. As the series goes on, in this first movie, you don't get as much, but you get a huge scene, like a huge emotionally driven scene, and you know so much more about this character than about Ridley. Ray. And I think that kind of just makes you drawn to his character a lot more.
Yeah, no, good point. Good point. I have to ask you guys a question. Do you think they set up the duality of storytelling with Rey and Kylo well in this first movie? You know, do you think that they hint that they have a connection of some sort in this movie at all?
I don't think not so much.
Yeah, not a ton. But again, I'm gonna make the decision to compare it to A New Hope. They don't really do that either with Luke and Vader, do they, in the first movie?
No.
Or in A New Hope? So I think it's fine that they don't, or they, if they are, it's very, very, very subtle. But yeah, I don't know. I don't super pick up on it.
Have you guys heard the conspiracy theory that what's his name? The guy that plays Finn. Austin, what's
John
his name?
Boyega.
Yeah. Have you heard the theory that he was supposed to be the main character for this movie?
No.
Yeah, so there's a rumor floating around that he was the one that was supposed to be like, because if you remember, we saw him drop in as a stormtrooper, and kind of run away, and then at the end of the trailer, he lights up the saber, and does his thing. Would Finn have made a better protagonist than Rey? What do you think?
I don't think so. I'll go ahead and say my piece about Finn and Rey here. I actually like them a lot in this movie. I think they have good chemistry, and I like their relationship together. And Finn's kind of like a lost puppy, in that he's been under the First Order ever since he was a baby, and he doesn't really know anything about anything because he's been so sheltered in that world for his entire life. And I don't know if that would really work as a main character. I mean, I guess it could, but I really don't mind Rey in this movie. Like, she's not a problem here, and I think giving her Finn and having them being together for basically this whole movie, and then also having the dynamic of her and Han, which is obviously a dynamic we don't get for the next 2 movies. That dynamic is awesome. I love her and Han together. It's a great like father-daughter dynamic that unfortunately is lacking in the next 2 movies, and would have been really, really awesome to have, but we don't have it for whatever dumb reason. But yeah, I'm okay with Rey being the main character in this movie.
Go ahead, Rex.
Yeah, I think it would have made for a cool like underdog, story and stuff like that. But it doesn't fall into the like Star Wars formula, and it would have been hard for them to try and connect it to a Skywalker if they're going that route. Or, I mean, they chose Palpatine this route, but
see, and I want to interject there because I asked myself the question. I'm like, okay, would Finn make a better, protagonist? I have no issues with Rey. It's fine. But I do like walk down the hall of consequences and I try and compare them. Other than the connection to the Force, Finn and Luke don't really have too different of backgrounds. Like, Luke grew up in kind of a hostile environment, but was still pretty sheltered, on this like planet of nowhere, Tatooine, right? And kind of did his own thing. and he was, kind of like the light side. It could have been cool to have Finn, have like kind of play the mirroring card there. Like he came from more of a darker place, and was the stormtrooper, but also was sort of sheltered. I don't know. I think it could have made for an interesting movie, but I mean, it's hard to see it any other way because for the simple fact that, Finn just doesn't really do much, the rest of these movies. And it's just an interesting question of what if,
He's the first one to light up the lightsaber, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that would have been...
I'm down with the idea. Like, I think it could have been cool, but...
Yeah, I guess it could have worked, I guess. It's interesting. It's hard to imagine that the First Order wouldn't have recognized that he was force sensitive, like, as he was a child or something.
True.
That's but I guess it could have worked. I hate what they did with Finn's character in the next two movies.
Yeah.
They just ruined him, and I think there's a lot of good there in this movie with him and his relationship with Rey, and they just decided that they didn't want to do that for some weird reason.
Yeah, I wasn't a big part of Han Solo like wanting to, didn't Harrison Ford like not really want to do it anymore? That's what I had read.
Yeah, I think that is part of the reason why they killed him off, which is kind of a stinky or sucky reason, but yeah. I guess you can't really change Harrison Ford's opinion on Star Wars. Yeah, which he's notorious for not liking Star Wars, like you ask him questions and he just straight up says like, I don't care, Which, you know what, to be totally fair, and there's a lot of actors in Star Wars that feel that way, I kind of get that. Like, I can only imagine what it would be like, because it's like you're in a Star Wars movie and you're that character for the rest of your life. And I'm sure after about 10 minutes of that fame, it would get really, really, really tiring.
Especially with all the super fans.
Yeah.
Well, and it just kind of speaks to the like moxie of Hollywood stars is like, look at the difference between Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and who stayed relevant longer. Do you think it's comparable at all, like as to who is the more famous one? Or what do you guys think? Do you think like Harrison Ford is more famous than Mark Hamill, or do you think Mark Hamill is the bigger name in Hollywood or just entertainment in general?
No, Harrison Ford's like one of the top names in Hollywood probably ever.
Yeah.
I would
Mark
say.
Hamill's probably the biggest like Star Wars. I don't know, like in the Star Wars world, like people love him more. But
I think too. It's interesting to talk about, like to think about just how different actors embrace their roles. Like for instance, Mark Hamill is hugely famous for being Luke Skywalker and the Joker, right? That's about it. It's almost like he kind of knew that that's how it was going to be based off of his career, and he's totally embraced those characters, whereas someone like Harrison Ford might see a different path for themselves, and it's like, nah, I don't really want to be like recognized as just that one thing. Like I want to be noticed for my other works that I've done. I mean, Indiana Jones by itself is, I mean, it's huge as to, like the fame that it's gotten him. So I don't really blame him for wanting to not be in that role his entire life, or just be like immortalized just for that one role. And I could totally see where he's coming from, wanting to get out. So
yeah, I'm actually glad they killed him off, because that scene is one of my favorite scenes of this movie, and I feel like that scene moved me the most out of any scene in this whole trilogy.
Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, no, that scene in itself is awesome. Like, it's really, really, really good. I kind of wish that we had maybe gotten it in the second movie instead of in the first movie.
Yeah.
If we're being picky, because it's just one of those things. I mean, again, I really enjoy Rey's relationship with Han more so than I enjoyed Rey's relationship with Luke. And the next movie is all Rey and Luke.
That's true.
And I wish that maybe that could have been more of a Empire Strikes Back moment in the second movie of Kylo killing off Han than it is in this movie. And then we have two more movies of craziness after that, to where it almost gets kind of lost in the shuffle of it all. of this really, really powerful and big and really well acted too moment. Like it's a really good scene.
It's one of those things too for me. Like in the theater, I remember being like, "That makes so much sense. I love that." I had no issues with it, and I don't really have an issue with it now. It's more of a thing of now that I've read a little bit of the expanded universe and like kind of see what could have been, even in the Thrawn trilogy, right? Like, holy crap,
Yeah.
there was just a lot of potential that seemed. I don't want to say wasted because I think it is good.
I was hoping
But I
they
don't
just that they made those books into the next trilogy. Like that's what I was hoping for.
Yeah, no,
It would have been cool. It would be cool.
Yeah,
Like you
it
already
would've-
have your script, you have everything you need. Like you just need to pay Zahn a bunch of money and like direct it really well, and you're good to go.
Yeah, no, it would have been cool to have Timothy Zahn kind of like have his hands on something, but that's not what we got. We got this, and like that's kind of what we're talking about. And obviously, like we criticize the things we love, and like we love talking about, and like we were supposed to start with the positives, but like this is what happens when we get together. Like we just dissect all these little things about Star Wars, and it is fun. I don't feel like anything's been negative. It's just real. Like this is just real fans talking and being real about the things like and reactionary. Years later. Go ahead, Caleb.
If we want to talk about positives, there is something I love about this movie. I love all of the little questions and mysteries that it sets up. So, who is Rey? Who is she waiting for? What happened to Luke? What is going on in that vision? How did Maz get Luke's saber from Cloud City? All of these different
Who is
little
Snoke?
questions. Yeah, who is Snoke? Where did the First Order come from?
Where's Luke?
All of this. Yeah, where is Luke?
It's so good at that.
It sets up all of these awesome questions that like you're just by the end of this movie you're just like could write a list of them out and you're just dying like on the edge of your seat waiting for the next movie or the next thing of content because you want the answers to all of these awesome questions. But the unfortunate thing is that the payoff to all of those questions is so rough and or non-existent, and that's the part that kills me. But I can't fault this movie for setting up all of those awesome questions because they weren't able to pay it off in later films. Like that would be unfair of me to knock this movie for that. Really, that's on the other movies that are upcoming and on the writers of those upcoming movies for not being able to answer those questions. But I love how they're able to set up and make us wonder all of these different things that unfortunately we don't really get the payoff that we deserve.
Yeah, that's well said, Caleb. And see, that's so funny you mention that because I think that was one of the biggest criticisms upon this film's release was, the mystery boxes as they were so, commonly named. Which is funny, to think about because now all those questions we had, it is like one of those things was kind of like, oh yeah, I could get that, but is it objectively disappointing? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Rex.
I don't think those are good criticisms. Like when people had those questions and they just want answers right away, because I kind of felt like that too. But I knew the next two movies, like okay, like I'm gonna have the answers, and so I think that like when we come back to this movie now, it's like it's hard to be positive when this movie is a good movie, and there's so many good things visually, and like what Caleb brought out, like all the little questions it leaves you, Adam Driver's performance, Harrison Ford's performance, all of that. There is a lot of good in this movie, but it's drowned out today for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's different. You can't recreate Star Wars magic like the big surprises, right? Like you can't recreate Vader revealing himself. You can't do that. I think they tried in Rise of Skywalker, right? I mean, they tried to like drop a couple of bombs on you. And go ahead, Caleb.
I will say, I mean, Kylo killing Han is a huge twist. Like that, I didn't see coming in the theater. Like Han getting stabbed like that, and then him falling off into oblivion on a planet that's about to blow up.
Yeah,
It's shocking. even going back and knocking, even going back and knocking, even going back and knocking, even going back and knocking. I just wish it happened in a different movie.
Well, I think people knew he was gonna die. Like we knew going into it. Like, okay, this is probably gonna happen, but we didn't know when or how or what.
That was gonna be that would be his own son.
Yeah, and they delivered for sure.
Yeah.
And I think, like, looking back at it, and I remember we were with, like, I think it was actually Ethan's son at the end of Force Awakens. Like, you know, like, Han gets killed. And by the end of the movie, like, that kid was just sulking. Like, he was so upset. And he hated that Han's son was the one that had done it. And to me, I thought that was, like, deeply poetic at the time, just based off of the father-son relationship that we've come to know and love so much in the original trilogy. You know, it was just kind of like, oh, like, yeah, it was great. And do you think that moment is comparable to Vader revealing himself, Caleb?
No, because that's one of the best plot twists of all time. Like, Vader revealing himself as Luke's father is, chef's kiss. Like, belongs on the list of, like, all-time greatest, you know, movie moments. So no, it doesn't equal that, but it's a good twist for a movie that came out in 2015, a Star Wars Disney produced movie that came out in 2015.
I thought it was the smartest thing they did in the movie. I mean, like, it's one of the smart. It might be the smartest thing about that trilogy, honestly. Now that I'm like just like trying to think of it and, you know, like real talk, and you start to see the argument that maybe Kylo Ren is the chosen one. You know, maybe. You know, I like we had talked about this last time we talked about these movies, and I kind of hated that narrative, but now that I think about it more, his arc is my favorite thing about these movies, I think. So yeah, man, it's always so funny when we sit down to record one of these and the conversation never freaking goes where I think it's going to. But I'm glad we're having this discussion. You know, it's like Star Wars therapy session for Gabe, because I think I'm starting to understand a little bit of the hate, you know, that the people had as these movies were coming out. So whereas before it was like, no,
drawing you to the dark side.
I think you are. Yeah, I think you are. No, let's move on to some more things that we want to talk about, good or bad. Who's got the next one? Because I have one if you guys don't.
I also really liked the scene. Okay, when Kylo's like mind melding with Rey, and after that, I feel like Rey she kind of like. I thought in my own head when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, she's like learning from his memories. And like, this is how she gets her powers, you know? And at the time I thought that was like really cool. And I had my own theory on that. But I really liked that scene, and kind of Kylo's powers were really cool just in general. Like seeing the light, you know, the shot being frozen. Seeing him like dive into people's minds. I don't think we hadn't gotten much of that in the movies at all. So
the only person we'd ever seen do it was Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, but it was never as intrusive of a process as what, you know, the dark side way of doing things was. You know, as we've seen with Kylo. And I like to think, you know, we talked about like, is there any evidence of them kind of like being a dyad? You could say that might be the starting point potentially. But then it leads me back to a question of, okay, well, the Force decided to connect them whenever Palpatine died then, whenever Vader was doing his thing or something. I don't know, it just leads like all these like weird questions about the Force. And I think there's always been this fun conversation around the Force and that we just don't know how it works, other than it surrounds every living thing. I think in this movie, or at least, you know, this movie set up another one of those mystery boxes. It would have been nice to know just exactly how that moment worked, you know, like for real, you know, rather than just kind of leading to speculate. But it is a cool moment, you know, whenever she's like, you know, I see your fears, you know, and you know, it is a cool moment for sure. Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, I'll just mention two things real quick that I really like. It's just a couple of scenes that I think look really awesome. One is the assault on Takodana. Is awesome. Just looks really incredible. Has some really cool moments where like Han no look shoots a guy and is using Chewie's bowcaster, and then the it all just looks really really good, and it's some of the best I think like just like battle scenes that we had seen in a Star Wars movie thus far. And then one of the other ones is the assault like with the X-wings on Starkiller Base, and they do all of these really cool like point of view shots of like in the trenches and like going in for the bombing runs, like where you're in the cockpit, and it all just looks really cool. And I love kind of like the flying mechanics. I know that's something that kind of gets criticized, like they're drifting X-wings, but I think it's cool, and it kind of
So
shows
cool.
it's cool, and it shows a increase in the like technology, because it's 30 years in the future, and things have changed, and these X-wings are different and new, and the TIE fighters are different and new, even though they kind of look the same. And I love the way that like the ships break up like from the laser blasts, and how like realistic it looks so awesome. The special effects in this movie are just incredible, and it keeps you right at the edge of your seat in all of those action sequences, and it's so much fun to
Some of the
watch.
best special effects I think of any movie I think that I've ever seen. So
When the Resistance flies in over the lake, and like they're coming in with the X-wings, like that gave me goosies. Even
yeah,
now I was watching on my iPad, like at work, and I was like watching. I'm like, holy crap, dude, that is so freaking cool. And yeah, it's interesting how Star Wars. Each time I watch a Star Wars movie, I pick up something new, and I think it'll be interesting to see what the conversation is around this movie another 5 years from now, and see how it stacks up now after all the new content that's coming out Star Wars wise. But yeah, no, there's a lot to love about this movie, and there's just those questions that I come back to, and just kind of the criticisms of how does this connect. I don't know if those are ever going to flee me, gentlemen, after this most recent viewing, but that's okay. We're going to see as time goes on, and we continue to review these movies. We're getting close to about an hour, so you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
Oh, just one other thing. Han has one of my favorite quotes in all Star Wars in this movie, where he tells Finn, "That's not how the Force
Yeah.
works." I just love it. It's such a like gifable moment.
Yeah.
I love Han in this movie. He's
I do
fantastic.
too. It might be Han at his best, honestly. Are pretty close. Like whenever he's explaining how the Force, and he's like, "It's all true." That's like just a freaking iconic moment. On the Falcon, the hologram. Looking at the map, doing the thing, and he's like, "Yeah, what's crazier is that it's all real." Like, and just kind of like those memories of watching Star Wars as a kid, and like him naysaying, and like now in his old tender age, he's finally come to grips with like, holy crap, like this is for real.
he gets so
Again,
much Han fandom in this movie.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And again, to Caleb's point, it would have been awesome if we could have had that in a different movie and had him and Leia doing their thing, because Leia is central to the Star Wars universe after the original trilogy. You know what I mean? Go ahead, Caleb.
And that reminds me of something that I know I've talked about, how I wish we had more Han in this movie. And it reminds me, I do remember hearing that their plan for these three movies too is that one of these was going to be Han centric, one of them was going to be Luke centric, and one of them was going to be Leia centric.
Yeah.
And we didn't completely get that because, Carrie Fisher passed away before they were able to finish filming Rise of Skywalker, and they had to use a bunch of, unused footage from the previous two movies. So it didn't really work out the way that they wanted to. But I kind of wish they hadn't done that, and we would have gotten to see more of that trio together, because we don't ever get that. We don't get Luke and Leia and Han all back together again. And that bums me out.
Well,
that we
and
didn't get that camaraderie that made that original trilogy so fantastic, and we don't get that in this movie
well, and there
or
is
in any of these movies.
yeah, you're onto it for sure. It's like we just kind of skipped over things that might have happened in Legends, and like now this is the new story we're getting. Because yeah, the stories that come after the original trilogy and the books and stuff like that, it is very centric around that that team. And there are moments where they have their dark periods and they're kind of split up, just like we saw in the movies, like even in the Thrawn books. But it's always around them kind of trying to come back together. And yeah, we just don't get that at all in these movies. I don't think there's a scene. There's not one scene where all three of them are together. In this trilogy, which is it's kind of crazy to think about.
That is like coming to that realization kind of makes you sick. Like they did a disservice to us because they weren't able to do that. Like I don't know how they allowed that to happen.
Yeah,
because it seems so painstaking. Like it's so obvious.
Yeah,
but it's whatever.
It just makes you ask the question, like from a Star Wars, like unabashed Star Wars fan standpoint of I consume it all whenever I can and like do the thing. Am I glad that we have this movie? Yes. And like that's kind of what Elijah, last time we had him on. It was kind of that thing of, yeah, like I'm glad there's more Star Wars out there. And I was so happy that we got new live action Star Wars movies. And I think as more live action stuff has come out, it's shed more imperfection or just shed light on more of the things within the production and the imperfection of the storytelling and things like that, to where that magic or those things that you can kind of write off become less forgivable because the new stuff coming out is just so much better. And it's like, oh, whenever you have like a solid plan, yeah, it's like you're able to just kind of punch holes and, punch holes in your own personal. I mean, that's what you guys know me. I have been a diehard, like ride or die sequel fan for years on like this very topic. And I don't want to take away from this. I still like these movies. And I still think that you can justify and fight about things. And there's all kinds of double standards about these movies. And I think the question I come back to with this first movie, all other movies aside, kind of this re-entry into the series, is did they do a good job in trying to like reboot Star Wars with this movie? I think they did. I think they did a good job. And the things that we've been talking about, the big like talking points that are negative, quote unquote, or just like criticizing the film, I think that kind of shows our Star Wars fan love more than anything. Because just kind of like writing it off and being like, oh yeah, like that was amazing, there's no issues. That's not doing any good. It's good to, you can have these types of discussions and like poke holes in the things that you love without being toxic about it. You know what I mean? But do you guys think this was a good like re-entry into the series?
This movie specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. Like it's a good, solid foundation. Is it perfect? No, of course not. But that would be silly to expect perfection. But I think that they could have done some really, really awesome stuff with this movie moving forward. But yeah.
Yeah, and we'll see. Yeah, we'll get into it more. And I'm still of the mind, that The Last Jedi might still be my favorite out of these three. I haven't seen it in a few years, or maybe 2 years. So it'll be interesting to see or last year. I watched it last year around this time. Because I was reading the Dark Empire book, the comic, I think. And I was kind of comparing notes, and there's a lot of the expanded universe in Rise of Skywalker, and there's a lot of the expanded universe kind of sprinkled in, like nods to it within these movies. But it just leads me to wonder, it's like, well, why didn't you just make movies around the expanded universe? Like, we have those stories already that are awesome, But yeah, we'll continue to criticize these movies. Probably the harshest I think I've ever criticized them. More just because now I'm starting to see more things, and it's like, yeah, I don't know if I like that as much now. I mean, I still like it, but I don't know if I love it as much as I used to. So we shall see. Rex, do you have anything final you want to say before we wrap this bad boy up?
I just think we tend to, as we get older too, we tend to like just want more out of things. And when we've been watching Star Wars since we were kids, like we have like these expectations in our heads and stuff. And I think those are probably almost impossible to meet, and kind of basically what they took on was maybe too big to like please everyone, and it's always going to be divided no matter what. But the real issues that I have with this, I'm pretty sure we're going to touch on the next couple episodes, because it's about how they went in making these movies. And the first one is totally fine and I love it. And then after that, that's where we get into like, muddy waters.
Yeah. Go ahead, Caleb.
No, I was just going to say, I would completely and totally echo what Rex said. And I feel like maybe they rushed it a little bit too. And that may have been what contributed to things. And it seems like there were just a lot of kind of maybe wishy-washy people that may have worked on these.
And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Caleb. Go for it. Finish your thought.
That's all I really got to say. But I totally agree with what Rex said. It's really well said.
Here's the thing. 2015, a couple years after that, we started what would become Wannabe Critic Productions, right, with Geekly Biweekly. And I just think about the amount of time and effort we put into like coming up with show ideas, drafting shows, recording, editing. Like we had plans. Like even if something didn't work, like we would try and change it. We actively do that now. We always try and like come up with the best possible like thing we can come up with for this small little wannabe project that we do. And as I move more into this field of like production and things like that, it's like, yeah, you don't hit the record button and you don't start filming unless you got a plan and an end goal. And that's the whole point, is to have an end goal. And there is a part of me that wants to fight with people and be like, yeah, but it's still Star Wars. It's great. But it's like, it's egregious from a production standpoint in that it just doesn't work. Like it doesn't make any freaking sense. And it's interesting that just now, like now it hits me more than ever, because, you start to ask these questions. It's like, well, maybe I could end up doing production professionally and, like working on writing things and like helping things, producing things, making things come together. This should have never been made. These movies should have never been made without a solid just end goal. Even if people didn't like them. That's the difference. That is the difference, and this is the argument's been made before. That is the difference between the prequels and this movie, is that at least George Lucas, for all of his glory, knew where he wanted his movies to end up. You know what I mean? Go ahead, Caleb.
I was just going to say, like I said, this movie brings out some huge questions, but why don't you have the answer to those questions already answered? Yeah. And take us as the viewer on a journey from us asking that question to the answer that you already know. And that's storytelling. That's how it works. You take the reader or the viewer or whoever, you take them on a journey, but they didn't do that. They just asked a question and a lot of times either gave us a poor answer or left it open-ended to our own imagination. And that's poor storytelling, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. And go for it.
What
Rex.
makes it more like kind of infuriating, but mostly just mind-boggling, is the talent is there. They have all the pieces there to make something like the most amazing thing possible. Like they nail like everything talent-wise, but then it's just like, okay, the story just doesn't flow. And it kind of throws a wrench into everything. And it's like frustrating because you want to love it so much. And when you watch it and you see those things and how the story just doesn't really make sense, that's what makes it so hard to really like love it, or to even like the movies, you know? And it's like
Yeah.
there's so much talent there. Everything is just perfect. It feels good. The acting's great, the special effects, just everything. And then they just, one of the most important parts is the story, and it's just not there.
Yeah. And it didn't have to be like some complicated thing, you know, like the original trilogy. It was pretty simple, you know, like bad guy is introduced. Second movie, bad guy is good guy's dad. Third movie, good guy redeems bad guy dad, and bad guy dad is good guy dad now. Easy, simple, fill in the blanks from then on. We didn't get anything like that here. It was just like they asked a million freaking questions that had that, like Caleb hit on the head, seemed super interesting and still are interesting. Like they still are interesting. Like whenever she's in Maz's, palace and she touches the lightsaber and like she starts to have the vision, that's one of the coolest things in Star Wars. Like, that Rey can do is that she has this cosmic connection to the Force that we've never seen before. Right? Her and Kylo kind of both have that, as we see in the next movie. Yep. But it's just never fleshed out. It's like, oh, they're a dyad in the Force. It's like, well, that's not very
It's like it's really almost like they off, overthought the movie so much that they forgot how to make a movie.
Yeah, it's just
I don't. And we know,
story. J.J. Abrams is a very ambitious dude, and it's one of those things. I've done it a million times. I'll be like, hey, guys, I got this new project I'm doing. And then it falls apart because I have too many things going on, right? It's like you can't do that when you're a big budget movie producer unless your name's J.J. Abrams, So, I don't know. I think this movie is good, and I like it a lot still, but there's just more questions I found myself asking and like more things I wanted to talk about this time than last time. So, it'll be interesting to see how we move into the next movie, The Last Jedi, which I once touted as being good as Empire Strikes Back, which we know it's not. But I think it's going to be an interesting conversation when we talk about what Rian Johnson did and how it's going to be remembered in the future. Because even though I know people hate it, I still respect him for throwing a wrench in this whole thing. And trying to really like make it his own, because like to do that, whether you love it or hate it, that takes like the biggest balls on the planet to take a newly revitalized biggest IP on the planet and then say like, we're doing this with it for sure. Like, this is what we're doing. I got like, it plopped on my desk. Let's do this, so it'll be interesting to talk about it, whenever we get into this next movie. So as usual though, on Keeping It Real and in true wannabe fashion, we usually do this thing where we put a number on this, on this movie. If you guys had to put a number on it, what would you give it? Caleb, hit me with it.
So this is a solid 7.5 for me. It's a strong movie by itself. Asks some awesome questions. So it shows us some awesome action sequences. Gives us some good performances, gives us some interesting new characters that we want to learn more about and we want to go on a journey with. And when you're starting a trilogy of movies, that's a good base, a good foundation for a start to that trilogy. And I can't fault it too much for this. And this is the sequel movie that I've watched by far the most out of all of them. And it's probably the one that I find the most enjoyable and most rewatchable because it doesn't irk you to death with a bunch of little things.
Okay. Well said, Caleb. Rex.
Yeah, I gotta give it an 8 just because of the amount of production value that you get in this movie. It's like they took everything above and beyond, and I think it truly is a really solid movie overall. So yeah, 8 for me.
You guys know me. I don't believe in decimals. And it's hard. This is a hard score to give. I find myself leaning more towards a 7. I think it's good at this point in time. Of course, that could change in the future. I could come up with some thing in my head. It's like, oh no, it's great. No, it's fine. I was an idiot a year ago or 2 years ago or whatever. I think it's a good movie, and I think I think it is across the board good, and yeah, that's all I really have to say about it. Honestly, I think I've said everything I need to say about this one. So there you have it.
Surprising,
ladies
Gabe.
and gentlemen.
Surprising.
I know. I thought I was gonna rate it higher too. But this is what happens on Star Wars therapy sessions. We talk through our feelings, and I think that's where it lands for me. My favorite things about the movie are Han and Kylo. Those are my two. Like, that moment is amazing, and Kylo's kind of entry is amazing. But yeah, it's just there's too much setup almost, in a way. Like, there's almost like, I don't know. It's hard to put my finger on. Go ahead, Caleb.
I just realized we never once mentioned Poe Dameron's name.
Thank God.
Oh. Yeah,
it's kind of funny. I like Oscar Isaac. It's funny.
I do too.
I don't super mind him in this movie.
He's good. I just
we
he's
never
kind of
mentioned him.
He's kind of just like, I don't know. He's just like extra fat that could have been left on the cutting floor, I bet. Like, in my opinion,
yeah,
like he's just that one extra character that's too much.
I think it's true. It's like I almost forgot about him. I think, yeah, you probably could have unfortunately done without him. But
I mean, literally, what does he do in these three? We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it on the next one. But there's not enough. There's no time. But that's what she said.
Yeah.
No time. Okay, gentlemen, it's been fun as usual. I really liked this episode. This felt really real. It just felt like real. Like, I you guys know me. Like, I love talking about Star Wars. It's been kind of chummy, right, to go through the first 6 movies. Like, we've talked about the cringy things in the first 3 movies. We talked about the things that we liked and what we didn't like in the original trilogy. And now it's like we're on to the current state of things. And it's like, here we are. How are we feeling now? So I have one final question for you. Would we feel different about this movie if The Mandalorian did not exist?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think Mandalorian and this movie, they're so far apart, like timeline wise, that them having a different feel kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah. I think just in terms of, like, literally, I think we've established, like, literally just having an end goal, right? That would have been like having the answers to the questions would have been awesome, that's what they've done in The Mandalorian. Like, they knew exactly where it was going to go once it started. So, but anyways.
It's how you make a show or a movie.
It's how you do it. Yeah.
It's how you tell any basic story.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're not wrong, Caleb. You're not wrong. All right, gentlemen. We come to that point in the show where we're going to plug all of our stuff. So, Caleb, why don't you get us started? Where can people find you?
So you can find me at ChiefNNY on 18 on Twitter. You can also check out my couple of YouTube projects I've been working on. So it's Fantasy Tomorrow, talking about fantasy football stuff on YouTube, and Pretty Smart Sports, talking about all sorts of different sports stuff on YouTube. So check those out if you want. You can also find us on Twitter or on Facebook. So check us out there.
There you have it. Rex, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter, lurking the interwebs, at WRECKS90, Rex90. That's pretty much it. That's like the main spot where I go for my social media. Twitter, that's it. Nice.
As usual, you can find me over at The Wannabe Critic. I have my YouTube channel. I also, I don't talk about it that much just because I realize now I probably should be talking about it because it's by far the most popular thing that I produce. Wannabe Music Reviews is at about 1.5, like 1,500 watch hours now. We're growing and popular. That channel's growing, which is funny because it's pretty simple content to make. It's just reaction content, but it's doing well. So if you have something you want me to react to, definitely go there. I've been enjoying that. But of course, I have my gaming channel where we produce Punch Counter Punch, Let's Plays, whatever I have time for, basically, is what gets made. And whatever I'm in the mood for. I've gotten to the point where it's like, you know what? You don't need a consistent schedule. I'm doing this, like, for real now. And I have plenty of stuff to keep me busy, so I'll release stuff whenever I feel like it. You know what I mean? Also, I'm happy to say that this is a project that Rex and I are both working on. I am working at Meta Jungle, which is a NFT hub for the experienced enthusiast, the collector, the creator. Basically, it is a opportunity to collaborate with the community and learn about the NFT space and why that's kind of where crypto and, that's kind of the future of finance in a way. And, we're trying to equip you and empower you with the ability to make savvy decisions on NFTs and kind of, wade through the bad actors in the space and kind of see like what's a good decision whenever it comes to NFTs, what's a bad decision, what's a good project, what's a bad project, and kind of talk about, be very open about the criticisms that the space receives. So Rex is the community manager over there, and I'm working on with the content crew. So definitely go check us out. We have a podcast. We also have a YouTube channel. So there's a plethora of content over there. So definitely go check it out. If that's it, thank you guys for joining, and thank you as the listener for showing up, and we will see you next time. Say goodbye, gentlemen.
See you later, guys.
Adios.